Good evening and welcome to this week's edition of The Message. I am your host, Donatus King. We'll spend this next hour with one purpose in mind, and that one purpose is delivering the message that God is Almighty. Everything that ever was, is now, or ever will be is a piece of God. Everything that ever was, is now, or ever will be was made by God. Everything that ever happened, is happening right now, or ever will happen, was made to happen by God. God has a master plan for all time and all creation. God is Almighty. The message is brought to you by, is produced by the Society of Knowledge Incorporated. The Society is an interdenominational, religious, spiritual organization. Our members come from various different religious and spiritual backgrounds. We have various different religious and spiritual beliefs. Although we come from different backgrounds and have different beliefs, there's one belief that we share. There's one piece of knowledge that we hold in common, and that's the knowledge that there is a being, by no matter what name we may have been taught to call that being, by no matter what name we may have come to know that being, whether that name be God, Allah, Yahweh, Jesus, Buddha, Jehovah, Marduk, Enlil, Bel, by no matter what name, we know that there is a being that possesses not some of the power, not most of the power, but all of the power. We know that there is indeed an almighty being. And that being that personally I call God is indeed almighty. That's the reason we do this show, and the only reason we do this show, to deliver the message that, as I said, that being that personally I call God, that being is indeed almighty. Today is September the 19th, 2019. I remind that fact because tonight, as we are on most Thursdays, we are live. And I remind that fact because this show is an open discussion. It's a two-way conversation. Brother Rashida, thank you for joining us on Facebook. Brother Robert, thank you for joining us on Facebook. Those of you that are watching by Facebook, I invite you to join the discussion by posting your comments. And I also ask that you please hit the like button. Let us know that you're watching the show. If you have any other comments, please post them on Facebook. If you're watching by television, you can join the discussion by calling the number that's on your screen. That's 504-483-3336. And I invite you to join the discussion because, as I said, this is an open discussion. It's a two-way conversation. If there's something that's going on in your place of worship, your church, your mosque, your masjid, your synagogue, your temple, and you want to let the world know about it, post your comments on Facebook, and I'll do everything that I can to make sure that I read those comments. And if you're watching by TV, call in and share your comments. Let us know what's going on in your place of worship. If there's something that's going on in your nonprofit organization, I invite you to share that information with the world, post your comments on Facebook, or call in the show, and you can give your message over the phone. More important than what's going on in your place of worship, more important than what's going on in your nonprofit, if there's something that God has done for you in your life, a miracle that God has worked in your life. And I use that word literally, a miracle, because the God I'm here to tell you about tonight is working miracles. You know, we read in the Bible about miracles that God worked thousands of years ago. I'm here to tell you that God is working miracles today. That's right, September 19th, 2019, God is working miracles. So if God has worked a miracle in your life, post your comment, post your testimony on Facebook, call in and share your testimony. Sister Carolyn, thank you for joining us on Facebook. Let us know. Offer your testimony. Let us know that, let the world know that God is still working miracles today. You know, maybe someone is going through some tough times right now, whether it's financial times or health problems or some kind of problem, some issue that they're dealing with. And they may be just about discouraged, just about ready to give up all hope. You calling in, sharing your testimony, and letting the world know that God is still working miracles, that God worked a miracle in your life, solved the health problem that you went through, solved the relationship problem that you went through. That might be the one thing that someone needs that will encourage them, give them hope, help them to hold on until things get better. I'm talking a little bit fast because we have a full show tonight. We're going to continue a discussion we started a couple of weeks ago I'm so happy. I feel so blessed that we are live on Facebook again this week. Last week we were not live on Facebook. We had some technical difficulties, but I'm extremely happy that we are live on Facebook tonight. Let's see if we can move on. And as I said, I'm going to be moving kind of fast tonight because we do have quite a bit that we want to cover. All right. For those of you that are familiar with the show, we have our announcements, then our testimonies, and after that, we have our religious spiritual study. And as always, I remind all of us, including myself, to prove all things, hold fast that which is good, coming out of First Book Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 21. Good evening, Sister Carolyn. We're going to continue our discussion about Babylon. All right, and it's a whole lot of information we'll get to share. Our words of inspiration will come out of the book of Exodus, chapter 8, verses 7 through 15. Announcements, do you see our main website? And I'm just trying to catch up on Facebook. Okay, our main website, that is www.godisalmighty.org. That's www.godisalmighty.org. I invite you to log that website into your web browser, and 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you can visit that website, and there are links to all of our social media platforms. We have a blog, we have a Facebook page, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. You don't have to worry about all those other addresses there. Just go to that main website, and there are links. All you have to do is just click on a link, and it'll take you there to our different social media outlets. Rock of Ages Ministries International, that's Apostle Ronnie Bailey, www.ronniebailey.com. I invite you to visit their website, and they're doing some great things. New Orleans Peacekeepers, 504-500-1706. If someone is having a dispute and you want to help them to work it out, mediate it, the Peacekeepers will come out there and help you talk through any dispute that you're having. Call 311 in New Orleans area. Call 311 between hours of 8:30 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. for free smoke detectors. As always, please check your vehicle's back seat for babies. Yes, we're in the middle of September. Actually, we're going towards the end of September, but the temperature is still getting into the 90s, and it's very easy for a child to die of heat exhaustion in the back seat of a car. So get in the habit of checking your back seat, making sure that you don't leave a child in the back seat. 2020 has jobs. The 2020 census has jobs available, and you can apply online. That website is 2020census.gov/jobs. If you want a phone, you can call in 1-855-562-2020. Excellent pay, flexible hours, paid training, and temporary jobs. So if you know someone that needs some extra income, maybe you need some extra income, give the census a call, and you can maybe get a job. Religious spiritual study, prove all things, hold fast that which is good, coming out of First Book Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 21. And we always put that reminder, and we put that reminder up because if you see something on the screen here on the show, or if you hear me say something, or one of our viewers, one of our Facebook viewers, or one of our TV viewers that says something, that's good to hear what's being said, but check it out for yourself, all right? Check it out for yourself. And if you find out that it's not quite accurate, then if it's something that I'm saying here on the program, please let me know it's not accurate, and I can correct that. If it's something that needs to be clarified, call in or post your comments on Facebook, and so we can clarify it, because all we want to do is to share good information here on this program. All right, Babylon. We're going to pick up where we left off a couple of weeks ago, talking about Babylon, discussing Babylon. And we're going to discuss Babylon because, as you see on your screen now, Babylon, we're talking about 5,000 years ago, and that's going back, in the Christian era. We in the year 2019 of the Christian era, But this is before the Christian era. Babylon goes back at least 3,000 years before the Christian era. So we're talking about things that occurred 5,000 years ago, and Babylon was in its heyday way before the religions of Judaism developed, way before the religion of Christianity developed, and way before the religion of Islam developed. So one of the things when we're reading through our various religious texts, okay, so if you're Christian, your religious text will be the Bible. And when you read the Bible, you know that there are two basic parts of the Bible, the Old Testament and the New Testament. When we read Judaism, the text, that's the first 5 books of the Bible, and that's in the Old Testament. And when we read Islam, the Quran, we'll see that there are stories in Islam that are almost identical with the stories that we find in the Old Testament. So when we read the Quran, we'll see references to Abraham. We'll see references to all of those folks that are referenced in the Christian Bible and in the Jewish text. So we see the relationship amongst Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. But the funny thing about all of that is when we go back to the ancient religions of Babylon, we find similar stories in those texts. We find similar stories relating to the flood. Okay, the Bible talks about the great flood and Noah. We find similar stories relating to the creation of the world. We find similar stories relating to the fall of man and man being kicked out of the Garden of Eden. So there are all different types of similarities. But the thing about it is that those writings relating to the Babylonian religions, those writings were thousands of years before the creation of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. So we definitely see there is a correlation, there's a relationship amongst those 4 religions. And what you see on your screen right now, and I just put that up there just so we can have some reference, because, a lot of times we might be listening to the news and they're talking about world news and something's happening in Greece or something's happening in the Mediterranean, something happened in Turkey. And some of us might not really realize, have an understanding about where those places are. So when we speak about things here on this show, we like to throw a map up to give our viewers just a little understanding about the geography. Okay, so when we talk about the Babylonian Empire, this, as you see on the screen, in the middle of your screen in that red, okay, that's what's called the Babylonian Empire. And you see that it is part of the modern day areas known as Iraq, Syria, a little bit of Iran, Saudi Arabia, and over here right under the B and the Y, that's the area around Jordan, okay, Israel. So this whole area, and there's a sliver like the center of it, that's called the ancient territory called Mesopotamia, the Fertile Crescent between the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. And when we read in the Bible, we read about the Tigris and the Euphrates. Okay, and this is what I was speaking about as far as that Fertile Crescent. And that Fertile Crescent, and as you see on your screen right now, that Fertile Crescent, and here, Sumer. You may be able to see the pointer going Sumer. And really what I want to point out to you is right here, this area right here, this city called Ur. And you go up northwest, and that's Babylon. Okay? And there's the Tigris River, the Euphrates River. But those are two important cities, Ur and Babylon. And here's the area called Sumer. Now, what's so important about Ur is when we read in the Old Testament, we read about Abraham. That's right, Abraham, the patriarch of the Jewish religion. Abraham came from the city of Ur. All right? That's where he came from, Ur. All right? That's all a part of Sumer. All a part of what some folks call Babylon. So that's where Abraham came from. So if Abraham is a patriarch of the Jewish religion, he's one of the founders of the Jewish religion, and if he came from Ur, which is a part of the Babylonian Empire, if he came from there, then quite naturally he learned about the Babylonian religions. And it's understandable that some of the elements that he placed in this new religion of Judaism, it's quite understandable that some of those elements came from what he was taught as a child when he was in Babylon. It's understandable, and I love to do some studying, to find out things. That's good to learn. I like learning. All right, let's move on. And all right, what you see on your screen right now, that's Hammurabi. Okay, that's what Hammurabi. And Hammurabi, there's something that he's credited with, and he's credited with what's called the Code of Hammurabi. It's a well-preserved Babylonian code of law of ancient Mesopotamia. In that same area that I was showing you, that Fertile Crescent, some folks call that Mesopotamia. The code dates back to about 1754 BC, okay, 1,754 years before the Christian era. It is one of the oldest deciphered writings of significant length in the world. And Hammurabi, who was the sixth Babylonian king, he enacted the code. And as you see Hammurabi on your screen now, and what you see on your screen right now, that is the code. And its partial copies exist on a 2.25 meter stone stele and consists of 282 laws with scaled punishments, adjusting an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, as graded depending upon social status of slave versus free man or woman. Now see, this code of Hammurabi, an eye for eye, a tooth for a tooth, where have we heard that before? That's right, we heard that in the Bible, okay? The book of, I think it's in either Genesis or Exodus. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, okay? So these is kind of interesting that those same laws would come out of Babylon, and then we find those same laws in the Old Testament. And again, someone out there checking, Sister Carolyn, if you let me know if that is coming out of, it might be out of Leviticus, I'm not sure. But if why don't you check and let me know so I can get that right information out in the Old Testament where it speaks about an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. All right, and what you see on the screen now is a depiction, not a depiction, that's the stele, that's the stone that was found, showing this code of Hammurabi. And as you see, this next slide that's on the screen right now, that is a depiction, as far as scholars say, the left portion of it, that's a depiction showing Hammurabi receiving the laws, the code of Hammurabi, from the god Shemesh. And as you see on the right-hand side, that is the cuneiform inscription. That's how they wrote. Okay. Now, see, the great thing about it is that this is stuff that was written in stone. And you hear people use that phrase, it being written in stone. Well, the great thing about that is even though this is more than 4,000 years old, it still exists because it was written in stone. Now, had that been written on paper or on papyrus, it might have disintegrated thousands of years ago. But because it was chiseled, written in stone, it still exists. Okay, it still exists. So as you see on the right, that's the cuneiform writing. And I'm just going to read a little bit about Hammurabi. Hammurabi ruled for 42 years from about 1792 to 1749 BC, according to the Middle Chronology. In the preface to the law, he states, Anu and Bel called by name me Hammurabi, the exalted prince who feared God. And there, as you see, a depiction of the Babylonian god Anu. All right, on your screen now, that's a depiction of Anu. And you'll see there's some depictions of Anu as being a winged god. All right. And I'll just read this out. Who fear God to bring about the rule of righteousness in the land, to destroy the wicked and the evildoers, so that the strong, Sister Glenda, thank you for joining us on Facebook, so that the strong should not harm the weak, so that I should rule over the black-headed people like Shamash, and enlighten the land to further the well-being of mankind. Okay? And we see on the screen now Bel, the Mesopotamian god Bel, and we see references in the Old Testament to Bel, the god Bel. So we see all this interrelatedness, all these commonalities between Judaism and the Babylonian religions. On the screen right now, we see that's Shamash, okay, the god Shamash, and that's Akkadian. In Sumeria, the god Shamash was known as Utu, and the god of the sun, who with the moon god Sin. Now that's S-I-N, the moon god Sin. And Ishtar, the goddess of Venus, was part of an astral triad of divinities. Shamash was the son of Sin. Shamash, as the solar deity, exercised the power of light over darkness and evil. In this capacity, he became known as the god of justice and equity, and was the judge of both gods and man. Brother Tainab, or Messenger Tainab, thank you. Messenger Tainab joining us from out of North Carolina, our society chapter out there. Thank you, Brother Tainab. And we're going to be working. Brother Tainab has some musical pieces that he's created, and we're working on getting those. We've shared them, some of his previous works, we shared them. And there's some new work, actually, I was listening to today, that hopefully in the near future we'll get a chance to play that. All right. And at night, Shamash became judge of the underworld. Now, a real interesting thing about all of this is I've talked about the connection between the Mesopotamian gods, the Babylonian, Sumerian gods, some of the similarities amongst those gods and what we read about in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. But there's something else. There's a whole lot of similarities between those Mesopotamian gods and the gods of the Egyptians. There's a whole lot of similarities, a whole lot of parallels. And when we study world history, we see that migration coming out of Africa, because when we talk about the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, where they join, and we talk about that area being called the Fertile Crescent, well, there's another river that was very fertile, and that other river was located on the African continent, and that's the Nile River. And we see a whole lot of similarities between what was going on in Egypt, going on that African continent, and what was going on in Mesopotamia. Sister Candace, thank you for joining us. And Brother Tainov, there's a whole lot of scholars that say they see that relationship between Easter and Ishtar. And we talk about that relationship on the show when it comes around Easter time. We do talk about that relationship. All right. And let's see, moving on just a little bit, because let's say it's a whole lot of stuff to try to cover. But some Mesopotamia myths were reflected in biblical stories, including that of the Garden of Eden, the flood, the creation, and the Tower of Babel. As the world's oldest religion, Mesopotamian beliefs influenced the monotheistic religions that came after: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Okay, so now a lot of what I'm reading is come off of the internet, some from Wikipedia, other sources, and I encourage you to do your own homework. Do your own homework, and don't be afraid. Okay, don't be afraid. Right? You know, I know the purpose of this show is not to condemn anyone, not to condemn anyone's religion, and not to attack anyone's religion. The purpose of this show, as I said at the very beginning, and as I continue to say, the purpose of this show is to deliver the message that God is Almighty. Now, while delivering that message, sometimes we learn things, and we learn things such as there is a connection between religions. We learn things such as when we go to the essence of Judaism, when we go to the essence of Islam, when we go to the essence of Christianity, when we go to the essence of Mesopotamian religions, Sumerian religions, Babylonian religions, when we go to the essence, when we go to the root, when we go to the very heart, the kernel of them, we find one thing throughout all of them. And that one thing is that there is an almighty being. An almighty, not a part mighty, not a being that has control over some things, but a being that has control over all things, everything. Almighty. And something else that we find a commonality that there is at the beginning of those religions. They recognized that there was a being that created all things. So if a being created all things, the only thing only materials that being had, that being could use to create all things was itself. So that's another brick in the wall. That everything is a piece of that almighty being. All right. Let's move on because we do have quite a show. Okay, Mesopotamia's gods were humans. They were human in form and characteristics. The four primary deities were An or Anu, that you see on your screen now, Ki or Ninhursag, that you see on your screen now, Enlil, and Enki. Now we don't have any photos of them to put up, but I'm really moving, and I'm just going to read something off here. The four primary deities were An or Anu, Ki or Ninhursag, Enlil, and Enki, who ruled heaven, earth, air, and sea respectively. Enlil gradually takes on all of An's powers and becomes the most powerful god. The four gods are the progenitors of the rest of the pantheon. Three other gods were also important: Nana, another name for the moon god; Sin, Utu, the god of the sun and judgment; and Inanna, the goddess of love and war. Mesopotamia's pantheon of gods and their deeds make up the region's rich, dense mythology, which will be explored later on. Yes, Brother Tainov, Messenger Tainov, everything is everything. Everything, Messenger, that's something that you say, that everything is everything. That's a word, that's a line coming out of a song. Everything is everything. All right? I think that's Sister Lauren Hill. Everything is everything. Else Messenger 10 of God was always black. Some folks say that black is the absence of color, and others say that black is the conglomeration of all colors. All right. Let's see. I'm going to move on, and those of you that are watching on Facebook, you see, all right, Brother Robert, thank you for joining us on Facebook. What you see on the screen now is called the Enuma Elish, and I'm going to read a little bit about that. The Enuma Elish is the Babylonian creation myth. This epic is one of the most important sources for understanding the Babylonian worldview. Over the 7 tablets, it describes the creation of the world, a battle between gods focused on supremacy of Marduk, the creation of man destined for the service of Mesopotamian deities, and ends with a long passage praising Marduk. Prior to the discovery of the tablets, substantial elements of the myth had survived via the writings of Belrossus, a 3rd century BC Babylonian writer and priest of Bel, also known as Marduk. These were preserved in Alexander Polyhistor's book on Chaldean history, which was reproduced by Eusebius in Book 1 of his Chronicon. In it are described the primeval state of an abyssal darkness and water, where Brother Tainov, Messenger Tainov, talked about black, abyssal darkness and water, the 2 primeval beings existing therein, said to be of a twofold principle. The description then relates the creation of further beings, partly human, but with variants of wings, animal heads, and bodies, and some with both sex organs. Do a little research and research this word, Anunnaki. Okay, Anunnaki. Look up that, and you might, be surprised. The description then relates to creation of further beings. Okay, I read that. The text also describes a female being leading over them, named as Omuraka, or the Chaldean Talath, and are slain by Bel, who cut her in half, forming heaven of one part and earth of the other. This Berossus claims to have been an allegory. The text also describes the beheading of a god and the mixing of the god's blood with the earth's soil, leading to the creation of man. That sounds kind of like in the book of Genesis when it talks about God out the dust creating his clay, creating the man. Brother Dwan, thank you for joining us on Facebook. The text also describes the beheading. Finally, there is also a reference to Bel's creation of the stars, sun, moon, and planets. All right. I'm going to skip over a lot of materials here, and trying to. This is a whole semester's worth of information. We're trying to fit into 25 minutes. So hopefully this is just enough to whet your appetite. For those of you that are searching, enough to give you a little bit direction, just a clue as to some of the things that are out there. And when we're reading, and if you look at the Enuma Elish, again, these are tablets. These are stone that this information was written in. And that's how come we know it now. We don't have to be in the dark. This is knowledge that is out there. This is knowledge that was written, as I say, written just like the pyramids, knowledge that was written in stone. Now this, some more stone writing. As you see, this is all broken up, but this stone writing, this is the Epic of Gilgamesh. And I invite all of you to do your own study and do your own research. Eye for an eye. There you're right, Sister Carolyn. An eye for an eye, coming out of the Babylonian Code of Hammurabi. Yes, sister. And this is the Epic of Gilgamesh. And again, the reason that we know this is... Now see, understand something. Get a little understanding. There are archaeologists that went out in the 1800s, went out to the areas of Babylon, Samaria, went out and started digging in the sand. And they found all this stuff that we're coming up with now. All right? And when they found it, that's how we know about these ancient Babylonian religions. So that information, that knowledge was not lost. It was just covered up. See, so if, I said earlier, this is not to try to shake anybody's religion or anybody's faith. This is to make it stronger and to make our faith stronger, not in any book, not in any man, but our faith stronger in who we are. And we are indeed a piece of God Almighty. All right, so let me move on. This is the Epic of Gilgamesh. That's one of the earliest written stories in the whole world that we've been able to find so far. And I kind of question that, as to whether or not it is older than those written works that we find in Egypt, amongst the pyramids and the other artifacts in Egypt. But the Sumerian hero Gilgamesh traveled the world in search of a way to cheat death. On one of his journeys, he came across an old man, Upnapishtim, who told Gilgamesh a story from centuries past. The gods brought a flood that swallowed the earth. Okay, very similar to what we read about Noah. The gods were angry at mankind, so they sent a flood to destroy him. The god Ea warned Upnapishtim and instructed him to build an enormous boat to save himself, his family, and the seed of all living things. He does so, and the gods brought rain, which caused the water to rise for many days. When the rain subsided, the boat landed on a mountain, and Upnapishtim set loose first a dove, then a swallow, and finally a raven, which found land. The god Ishtar, messenger to Tanab, the god Ishtar created the rainbow and placed it in the sky as a reminder to the gods, and he pledged to mankind that there will be no more floods. And again, see the text of the Epic of Gilgamesh. Now that sounds very, very much like what we read about in the Bible relating to Noah. All right. Hey, see, we have all right. That is I think that is the last of the, this is another, as you see, those of you that are watching by Facebook, you see that there is another screen that's up now. All right. All right. We're going to move on, and we're going to go to our words of inspiration. All right, Mr. Tanab. All right, the relationship between Noah's Ark and the Epic of Gilgamesh. And according to most scholars, the Epic of Gilgamesh was written before the Old Testament, and a story about Noah's Ark. Okay, our words of inspiration tonight, coming out of the book of Exodus, chapter 8, verses 7 through 15. And just a reminder, these words of inspiration, we read, and usually we're reading out of the Bible. And the reason that we're doing that, not because we prefer that to any other writing. We use that because most of the viewers of the message have that book in their home, so you can follow along word for word with it. And again, the reason that we use it, the same reason as the show, and that's to deliver the message that God is Almighty. Because when we read through the book of Exodus, when we read through the Bible, when we read through the Quran, when we read through the Talmud, when we read through the Torah, we find that same message, that there is an almighty being. All right, so let's see if we can get some inspiration tonight out of the book of Exodus, chapter 8, starting in verse 7. And the magicians did so with their enchantments and brought up frogs upon the land of Egypt. Okay. So we read last week, we read about God instructing Moses to go out and tell Pharaoh to let Moses' people go and worship God. And if they didn't, he had brought some plagues upon them. And one of the plagues that he brought upon them was the frogs. And now we read here that the magicians, they also brought up frogs upon the land of Egypt. Okay, the magicians did that. So these aren't any Jewish magicians. These are Egyptian magicians. Now, as I say, okay, that if you believe the Bible, okay, if you believe it, I'm not telling you have to believe it, but if you believe the Bible is saying that all this stuff that Moses and Aaron was doing, acting as instruments of God Almighty, the same things that they were doing, the magicians of Pharaoh were doing the same thing. Okay? We read about the magicians bringing up frogs. So now we see, it's kind of like playing cards. All right? Kind of like playing cards. All right? Here, Moses and Aaron, wow, they throw out a card. They work a miracle. Then the next thing you know, the Egyptian magician said, man, you ain't did nothing. Wow. They throw out their card. All right? So Moses and Aaron threw out their card and made these frogs come. And now the magicians did the same thing. Now, as I was saying, if you believe this is true, and I'm not telling you that it's true, I ain't telling you got to believe that's true, but if you believe it's true, this is something that we were talking about and we've been talking about. If you believe it's true, then that means that there's a whole nother dimension to reality. Listen to what I'm saying. A whole nother dimension to reality. If 3,000 years ago, when Moses and Aaron and Pharaoh were on this earth, if 3,000 years ago, the reality was that all these kinds of supernatural things could happen, if that is real, that Moses and Aaron could make these frogs come up, could turn the river into blood, if it's real that the Egyptian magicians could do the same thing, then that's a whole different dimension to reality. If it's real that those things actually happen, then that's telling me that if it could happen then, it could happen now. If there were powers that Moses and Aaron could tap into, if there were powers that the Egyptian magicians could tap into thousands of years ago, then what happened to those powers? Did they just disappear, or do they still exist today? I'm of the opinion that they still exist today. No, not the opinion. I'm of the knowledge that they still exist today. I'm of the knowledge that there's so much power that exists today that the words that the scriptures say that Christ spoke thousands of years ago, that if you have but the faith of what? A mustard seed, you could tell that mountain to move and it will move. I am of the knowledge that that same power exists today. See, because I know, understand what I'm saying, I know that God is almighty. I know that. And not because something I read somewhere, because of something somebody told me. I know that because it's God's will that I know it. And because I know that God is almighty, I know that these powers that are spoken about thousands of years ago, I know that God can have those powers existing today. I know that God has those powers existing today. Those of you, I'm going to say this now before I forget, I invite you to join the Society of Knowledge. If you belong to a church now, you belong to some other religious organization, some other religious group, that's fine. You don't have to give up your membership. I invite you to join the society. Help us deliver the message that God is Almighty. You can join by leaving your comment on Facebook. Just write a comment. Look, Donatus, I want to join the society. I'll get in touch with you. You can join us by going to our main website, www.godisalmighty.org. We have an email address there. Just drop an email. I want to join the society. If you want to learn more about the society, go to our main website. You can learn all about the society. We have hundreds of videos. Hundreds of videos. Some going back to right about Katrina. We had videos going before Katrina, but they got lost in the flood. Go to our YouTube page. You see the message that we've been delivering since we were incorporated in 1979. If you're open, if God is leading you, if you have had the Spirit leading you to want more, leading you to want more, I'm not talking about want more money. I'm not talking about want more prestige. If the Spirit has been leading you to want more knowledge about who you are, what you are, give us a call. Join the Society of Knowledge. Brother Malcolm, thank you for joining on Facebook. Brother Mark, thank you for joining us on Facebook. I'm going to have to move because we have maybe about 10 minutes, 12 minutes left in the show, so I'm going to have to move kind of fast. So let me just move on. Let me stop talking about moving on, and let me go ahead and move on. All right. So we were just there in chapter 8, Exodus chapter 8. We're in verse 8. Then Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron and said, "Entreat the Lord that he may take away the frogs from me and from my people, and I will let the people go, that they may do sacrifice unto the Lord." Now you see, this is something now. Pharaoh is making a deal. He's making a deal. Moses, y'all take the frogs away, I'm going to let your people go. Now let's see, what's happening with that? Did that indeed happen? And Moses said unto Pharaoh, "Glory over me, when shall I entreat for thee, and for thy servants, and for thy people, to destroy the frogs from thee and thy houses, that they may remain in the river only?" And he said, "Tomorrow." And he said, "Be it according to thy word, that thou mayest know that there is none like unto the Lord our God." See, now, I got to stop right there. And I stop right there for the one fact that, we talk about God hardening Pharaoh's heart. And I said earlier that God has a master plan for all time and all creation. You see, it might appear to be sadistic for God to tell Moses to go tell Pharaoh to let my people go, and then on the other hand, God hardening Pharaoh's heart. But now in that verse 10, we see that there is a reasoning behind what God is doing. And that reasoning is that so that thou mayest know that there is none like unto the Lord our God. Understand what I'm saying? Okay? Just get a little understanding. We were reading earlier, right? We were reading earlier today about Babylon. Okay? We were reading about Babylon, and there was religion in Babylon. In Mesopotamia, in Samaria, there were religions in that area. Okay. Moses, when you read about Moses, Moses traces his roots back to Abraham. See, the God that Moses is talking about right now, and we read through that now, it says the God of Isaac and Abraham. So this is like the new kids on the block. Okay, the Hebrews, the Jews, the new kids on the block. The old kids, the Babylonians, the Sumerians, the Mesopotamians, the Egyptians, the old kids on the block, they had their religion. So now this new kid is coming up on the block, and this new kid is talking about his God, the God of Isaac and Abraham and Jacob. So now this new kid on the block has got to make a reputation for himself. Understand now? Got to make a reputation for himself. So Moses is coming around telling Pharaoh who believes in the Egyptian religions, Amun and Ra. Pharaoh, who believes in the Egyptian religions, Pharaoh, whose magicians, whose priests can use powers, extraordinary powers. Pharaoh, who has been raised in this religion, the Egyptians that have been raised in this religion, that believe in this religion that's carved on the sides of the pyramids, this religion that's thousands of years old, and now you have this upstart, this new kid on the block, Abraham, trying to tell them about some other God. So now for Abraham, for the new kid on the block, to gain any kind of credibility, it got to show something. What that song says, show me what you're working with. So now God got a plan. God's plan is, look, I'm going to harden Pharaoh's heart, and that'll give me an excuse to whip out all these miracles. Just show him who he's messing with. See, sometimes, let me just slow down. Sister Carolyn, Sister Wanda, thank you for joining on Facebook. Let me slow down, okay? The same way God had a master plan for Moses and Aaron. And what we read just now in verse 10, that God's master plan was letting not only the Hebrews, but also the Egyptians, letting everyone know that there is none like unto the God of Abraham. See, even though when we were reading about God hardening Pharaoh's heart, it may have been hard for us to understand that God would really do that. Now we read in the scriptures, we get a little bit understanding. Our eyes start opening up a little bit. And we are more able to accept the works of God. But you see, at the beginning of the show, we say here that everything that ever happened, is happening right now, or ever will happen, was made to happen by God. everything. Moses telling Pharaoh to let my people go. God made that happen. Pharaoh saying, no, Moses, I'm not letting your people go. God made that happen. Jesus being stretched out on the cross. God made that happen. God has a master plan for all time and in all of creation. You know, in our lives, that's right, in your life and in my life, there may be things that God makes happen that we don't understand. You see, we may go to church every week. We may stay on our knees praying. We may put all of our money into the church. We may treat our fellow man with dignity and respect and treat them good. We may treat them the way we want to be treated, and still bad things happen in our lives. And we can't understand why these bad things are happening, why these evil things are happening in our lives. Why? God has a master plan. Sometimes God has to set us down so we can get some understanding. Sometimes God has to slow us down so that we will be in the right place at the right time for the next step in our lives that God has planned for us. God is in control. No matter how things may seem to be going, God is in control. And because I know that, I find peace. And my prayer to you, I don't know what God has planned for you in this upcoming week, but whatever it is, whether or not you run into somebody that God has hardened their heart, no matter whatever it is that God has planned for you in this upcoming week, I pray that God Almighty blesses you and yours with peace. And on that, we pray for those folks that are in Houston and all the other affected areas. We pray that as they go through this bad weather, that God Almighty blesses them with peace.